This is Word on the Streets, a podcast about the Buttles and Indian Corridor Improvement Project. This podcast is created by the City of Midland, Michigan, and produced by the MCTV Network. Welcome to Season 2, Episode 6 of Word on the Streets, a podcast about information, updates, and perspective on the Buttles and Indian Corridor Improvement Project in Midland, Michigan, and beyond. I'm your host, Katie Geyer. In our last episode, we reviewed the preliminary drawings for the Buttles Street redesign that were released by MDOT in July. So if you haven't seen those yet, I recommend going and checking them out on our podcast website, which is cityofmidlandmi.gov/corridors. You'll find them there under Season 2, Episode 5. So we're still a few months out on our next major Buttles update. So we're going to take a little sidebar today for this episode and focus on another corridor that's currently seeing some pretty big changes, and that is Saginaw Road in Center City. If you've driven through the heart of this district lately, you've probably seen, some orange barrels and yes, even a few trees missing. So we're going to talk about that today. Here today to talk about the what, when, and why behind those changes is the City of Midland's Community Affairs Director, Selina Harris. Selina, welcome to Word on the Streets.
Thanks, Katie. It's fun to be in this kind of setting with you.
Yes. If you have not seen the Lowdown on Downtown podcast, we recommend checking that one out as well. Selina is a co-host of that podcast. So, Selina, you've been with the city for a long time. In addition to supervising my shenanigans on a daily basis, you actually play a pretty significant role with both the downtown and center city authorities. So, tell us a little bit more about what you do for those different authorities, since our listeners probably haven't met you before, and how you kind of come in as part of this whole center city project.
Yeah, so I've been with the City of Midland since 1991, when I kind of started in your position with the city. We've expanded our community affairs department quite a bit, and now in addition to helping out with community affairs, I also oversee 2 tax increment financing districts for the communities. So that's the Downtown Development Authority, which I've overseen since about 2008, and Center City Authority, which is the Saginaw Road Corridor, since about 2011.
Yeah, so I'm glad that you mentioned the tax increment financing districts, because that was going to be my next question. We hear a lot from residents, why does the city care so much about downtown? Or why are they now investing in Center City so much instead of other areas of the community? There's a reason for that. Can you talk a little bit about what that means?
Right. So tax increment financing districts is a tool given to us by the state of Michigan. And it really came about like in the 1980s when malls became a big thing. Mm-hmm. And downtowns and business districts really began to suffer as they were abandoned for the new advent of the mall. So state of Michigan developed tax increment financing districts, which allows a community to identify a business district within the community and name that as a TIF district. And what a TIF district does is when that designation is set up, there's basically a tax assessment or a base level that is set, and then anything that is invested in that district beyond that date, the district can capture the taxes that would normally go into the general fund. The district captures those taxes and then reinvests it into that business district. So it really relies heavily on continual advancement of those business districts. And what it's set up to do is to help those business districts succeed, because things like downtown and Center City as business districts for small business owners in our community are very important to the overall health of our communities. So downtown, we've had a great deal of success, and really Center City is where downtown was 30 years ago. They're fledgling, they're just beginning. They were named a TIF district in 2012, so we're still waiting to kind of get off the ground with their Center City. Downtown, on the other hand, we've seen tons of investment. We've had the H and all the investment that's been made in downtown over the years. So we capture about $1 million in tax revenue for reinvestment in the downtown district. Center City, on the other hand, has seen kind of the opposite since being established as a tax increment financing district. We've lost major properties, like the Midland Ford property. When that was raised, that came off our tax rolls instead of adding to it. Things like the Bamboo Garden and Northwest Tires, those properties were raised, and most recently Midland Motor Inn behind Pies. So as those come off our tax rolls, we don't have any additional funding to reinvest, But the good news is those properties are all ripe for reinvestment. So bringing in that new investment, the new construction, the new businesses will help the Center City District in the long run.
Yeah. So this Saginaw Road Streetscape reconstruction, which we'll talk a little bit more in depth in a minute about, is not a project that exists solely in a vacuum by itself. This is part of a larger Center City redevelopment plan, which touches on a lot of the things that you just talked about and encouraging that new private investment and getting that tax capture to continue letting that business district thrive. So tell us a little bit about what the Center City redevelopment plan is, where it came from, and why the Center City authorities decided to pursue this.
Yeah, so our big shot in the arm came in 2017 when Dow decided to invest in the Center City area and gave us a $1 million infusion of funding to be put toward economic development for the Center City District. And instead of just jumping in and doing one semi-big project. I mean, $1 million sounds like a lot, but it doesn't go very far in the development arena. Center City took a step back. We took a year and we developed a redevelopment plan. We brought in a consultant who spent time with the community, spent time with property owners and business owners in the district to identify what are the challenges of making this district really successful. What are the opportunities? What would you like to see? We talked to the community. What do we need more of in this area? And ultimately, what we heard back a lot was walkability of the area was difficult. We neighbor a lot of residential areas. We have a couple senior housing facilities into or neighboring our district. We have Midland High. So we have a lot of walking, a lot of folks that may choose to walk or bike instead of driving a car. So walkability was a big item that came out of that study. Additionally, the attraction of new and exciting businesses was another item we heard a lot. So this plan is really helping to improve the walkability, the aesthetics of the district so that we can attract those new businesses as we invest more in this district.
Sure. So we've talked extensively on this podcast, as I know that you're aware, about the many benefits that having a walkable community or a friendly non-motorized use type of corridor has, not only for the corridor itself, but for the entire community and the surrounding areas. So some of those benefits that we've talked about include positive economic impacts. Those are critical to a corridor like Center City, like you mentioned before, that's kind of at the cusp of really potentially doing great work. So research has shown that communities with greater non-motorized access are better at attracting new businesses and more private investment. They encourage more consumer spending when people do visit, and they can even increase both commercial and residential property values, which, like you touched on with the TIF district, is a big deal when it comes to reinvestment within that corridor. So what are some of the features of the redevelopment plan, and specifically what we're doing now on Saginaw Road, that will increase non-motorized use?
Sure. So the first phase is the streetscape that we are currently in the middle of constructing, and this is an improvement from Dartmouth to Patrick Road. And what this involves is we had just numerous sidewalks built through over the years. So some may be 4 foot wide, some may be 5 foot wide. Many of them were crossing lots of multiple driveways to properties. So two of the big focuses of this project was standardized sidewalks. So we are installing 8 foot wide sidewalks on both sides of the corridor in the improvement area. And also we're working to close off redundant driveways. So we've offered several property owners in the district the ability to, under the costs of this project, close off a driveway if they had multiple driveways. So this is just one less thing that persons using bicycles or walking has to consider when they walk through there. One less driveway they have to look for cars.
A lot fewer conflict points between motorists and non-motorists.
So those were two very big points of this project. In addition, we're enhancing the lighting safety so that folks can walk later into the evenings and still feel safe and have good lighting. So as you'll see, part of this project includes new lighting that will not only enhance the motoring population, but will enhance pedestrians who are using the sidewalk. And then finally, new street trees. I know we're going to talk about that, but
right.
The aesthetics of this corridor. We had lots of street trees that had outgrown their livable life. They would be needing to be taken out in the next few years. We've been planning this project for a number of years. So as street trees had to be taken out, we haven't replaced them. So we had a kind of inconsistent tree line. So this will replace the entire tree line through there with standardized trees that will grow up at the same rate.
Yes, I'm glad that you mentioned the trees because on the city's social media, the trees were a very hot topic. Midlanders love a good tree.
Oh, yeah.
It's literally in our logo. We are obsessed with trees. We put so much time, money, and effort into urban forestry. We've got a great forestry department. And I know going through there, especially people that have lived in this area for a long time, it's a pretty stark contrast to go through there, like you said,
Absolutely.
with a very inconsistent tree line. But it's my understanding that that was actually something that was going to need to eventually be done anyway.
Right.
It was kind of reserved for this project, knowing it was coming up in a future construction season.
Right.
And I hear actually that there might be more trees as a result of this project. Is that true?
Absolutely. There were 83 trees removed from that. It's about a mile long areas in this project, phase one. And we replaced it with 147 new trees went in, so almost doubling what was there. And urban tree concepts are always changing, so these trees that were chosen are specifically designed to thrive in an urban setting. They receive a lot of pollution from motoring traffic, so they will thrive and they will be the right size so that they don't interfere too much with the sightline when folks are trying to find their favorite business through the Saginaw Road corridor.
Perfect. There is one other thing that I did want to mention as we're kind of talking about some of these improvements. Again, the Center City redevelopment plan is kind of driving a lot of these improvements, but on top of that, non-motorized transportation is something as an entire organization that we look at pretty regularly. Again, we've talked about it a ton on this podcast, but it's actually the second goal if you look at the city's current master plan. The second goal of the city's master plan right now is to provide and pursue multimodal transportation alternatives that can improve connectivity between neighborhoods, schools, parks, businesses, and other activity areas, like a business district, for example. So, as residents are kind of asking, why would you do something like this? This is our overarching document that drives the vision of our community. Right. We're undergoing a master planning process right now to update our current master plan, and I am sure that will be a trend that continues and even grows more as our organization continues to look at how that works. So if you see some schematic drawings, if you'd like to see those of what the Saginaw Road corridor is going to look like when it's all said and done, you can head over to our podcast website, which is cityofmidlandmi.gov/corridors. In addition to that, we have also put up some links to some interesting articles that kind of talk about the economic impact of walkability on communities. There's been some great research about that. So if you're interested in kind of how that works and why that works, check out those links. That you would probably really enjoy them. So construction began in mid-August. We're about 2 months now into the project. Some of the elements are starting to take shape. If you go down from Patrick to about that Haley area, you can see a lot of those sidewalks already in place. What's the latest update on construction, and when can visitors expect to see a completion date?
Sure. So, like you said, we've made it all the way down to Washington Street now. So we're doing the one side of South Saginaw Road first, and then we'll turn at Dartmouth and go down the opposite side of South Saginaw Road. We're a little behind schedule, and we do have some supply chain items that are stuck. So the lighting you may see a little delay in the lighting being installed and the lawn restoration. So there's an order for everything.
Sure,
right? We're putting in the sidewalks first. Before we get to lawn restoration, we have to run all the utilities and make sure those lighting elements are in place, and then we will restore lawns and plant the trees. But all in all, it should be wrapped up sometime by the end of November.
End of November. Perfect. Yes, I always try to stress to people there is an order when we do construction projects. So just because you see something maybe not happening one day or two, especially in the post-COVID supply chain issues, that is pretty normal right now for construction projects as we work to finish those up. So like we discussed earlier, this is just the first phase of Center City redevelopment. What's next after this?
So when we did the redevelopment plan in 2018, that's one of the things we looked at. What's a bite-sized but impactful project we can take on? So we split the redevelopment plan into two phases. The first phase we're completing now. The next phase will be Dartmouth all the way to Manor Drive, so including the Circle area. So that will be a big impactful project, probably much more costly than this one. Our current project is about $3.5 million in construction cost. The next one will take a harder look at what we're trying to accomplish in the Circle. We have some concepts developed, but we will take a deeper dive into those concepts, start talking more with the property owners along the Circle area and preparing them for all the great things that can come as part of this next phase, which will include the Circle reconstruction.
Sure. And just as a kind of an aside that sort of ties all these together, all the concepts we're talking about, we have Buttles, which is this project and this podcast talks a lot about. Now we have the Center City Saginaw Road reconstruction and the next phase of the Center City redevelopment plan. And connecting those, if you're familiar with our geography, is Ashman and Rod,
right,
which is something else that we're looking at right now. What's the latest status of those corridors?
Sure. So, and even beyond that is when we did the downtown streetscape in 2017, one of the recommendations that came out of that redevelopment process was the question of could we turn Ashman and Rod into two-way configurations in the downtown district. And lo and behold, not long after that, we started the Center City redevelopment plan, and they asked the same question: could we return Ashman and Rod to two-way traffic structures? Because honestly, if you think about it, if you're standing downtown and trying to direct somebody to Smith's Flowers or Kroger, somebody who's never been to our
right,
community again, I've lived here all my life, and I still struggle
yep,
to think how would I get somebody there. As you've talked about on this program, there was a time when Ashman and Rod were designed to take all the traffic into downtown Midland,
yep,
to accommodate workers for Dow Michigan Division, and that is no longer needed. So it's time to re-look at those corridors. They were changed once from two-way traffic to one-way. Now can we change them back from one-way traffic to two-way and benefit both the downtown and Center City and all those businesses in between? So we're taking a preliminary look at that. OHM has worked with us to kind of take some preliminary traffic counts and look at what that would do for traffic. And our next step will be to have another community conversation to get some feedback from the community. Change is never easy,
right,
but we really want to look at those elements beyond just, I don't want to change, and know how properties would be affected by this change.
Sure. And I think it's important to point out, too, that our street network is all connected. And as we look at connectivity, we're not looking at each of these individual districts like downtown, Center City, Midtown, Buttles, all by themselves. These are all part of a greater network, and we're part of a greater community. We want to make sure that we're meeting our goals in all facets of the community, not just in certain areas. So, the Ashman and Rod conversation is a part of that, making sure that we are doing our due diligence to make sure we're improving connectivity across the board, not just in certain areas.
And will be a big component of Phase 2 of the Center City redevelopment plan. We can't move forward until we know how Ashman and Rod will operate going into the future.
Sure. Well, Selina, thank you so much for joining us today to share a little bit more. This is an exciting project. Again, it's really meeting a lot of the goals that we've set out as an organization to meet in the past 20 years. So I know I'm excited to see this when it all comes to fruition. And everyone that loves trees is really going to love it in a couple of years. Once those trees grow up a little bit. So for the latest construction alerts and updated information on the Saginaw Road Streetscape renovation, you can check out cityofmidlandmi.gov/Saginaw Road. That's Saginaw RD. You can also check out midlandcentercity.com/redevelopment. You can look through that entire redevelopment plan. Lots of really cool drawings in there. Kind of get a better overall vision of the project. And you can visit our podcast website, cityofmidlandmi.gov/corridors, for a link to all of that stuff. So that's all for this installment, but we will be back soon with another episode and more updates on the Buttles and Indian Corridor Improvement Project and other infrastructure in our community. See you soon, and slow down. This has been Word on the Streets, a podcast created by the City of Midland, Michigan, and produced by the MCTV Network. For more information on this podcast or to learn more about the Buttles and Indian Corridor Improvement Project, visit cityofmidlandmi.gov/corridors.